So we all have expectations for other people, right? I mean, you'd expect so-and-so from families and friends, even strangers. And oftentimes we set our bars too high. Now, that's mostly our fault. But when expecting the witnesses to help as they're being stabbed in broad daylight is expecting too much, then something is definitely wrong. Sadly, according to a series of experiments inspired by the Kaiqi Zheng murder, this is exactly what one should expect in modern-day society. The two experimenters, John M. Darley and Bibbs Latane, discovered that the number of bystanders is inversely proportional to the chance of victims receiving help. In other words, there is no strength in number. And frankly, this bystander effect is quite like a splinter, in that if we don't manually remove it, it will never stop hurting us. So today, in order to pull out our splinter, we must first understand why we Homo sapiens are capable of such atrocious heartlessness. Second, we must acknowledge that our indifference can also be our doom. Only then can we begin to craft solutions to put an end to this evil, also known as apathy. So to really start off our depressing issue at hand, why are we so indifferent? Well, ironically, the fact is that we are not indifferent. In fact, we care a great deal, just not for the well-being of other people. According to Darley and Latane, the bystanders' indifference is a result of a complex chain of analyzations. And to sum up their essay of a conclusion, the bystander remains inactive because A, they fail to notice the victim, B, they feel that they have no right to interfere, and C, they fear the consequence of intervention. For example, in the simulated scenario of a man and woman fighting in the street, when the woman yelled, "Get away from me, I don't know you!" 65% of the bystanders stepped in. However, when the woman yelled, "Get away from me, I don't know why I ever married you," only 19% of the bystanders stepped in. Similarly, when placed into groups, almost no student reported the smoke that was supposed to suggest fire and cause alarm. You see, what we consider the social norms, our stick to yourself and mind your own business rule, is actually giving us a misconception that we have no right or power to help those in need. Because looking around idly is considered rude. We do not notice those who need our help. Because getting between two friends trying to kill each other is considered intruding. We do not intrude. And because we fear that we will simply join the victim, we let violence triumph over our humanity. And this indifference will one day be our downfall, because if we can ignore a violent scene staged for experiments, then we can also ignore a real rapist, and a real murderer, and a real terrorist. There's not going to be some miracle in which a person ignores the men and women fighting on the street, but decides to stand up against armed criminals. And all those who've lost their lives because the onlookers ignored them would agree with me that this mounting indifference is so fatal. From the murder of Kaiqi Zheng to the death of 2-year-old Wang Yue in China, bystanding has allowed so many lives to slip through our fingers. And perhaps the most abominable example of this soulless apathy would be Mr. Hugo Alfredo Teo-Yax. This homeless man, while having a rather comical name, did not have a comical death. On the 18th of April 2010, the 31-year-old Guatemalan immigrant bled to his death on the sidewalk of Queens, New York, after being stabbed on the chest repeatedly. However, Hugo was not some drug dealer who died at the hands of a fellow criminal. He was a helpful, innocent man who gave his life to save a stranger. At approximately 5:30 a.m., surveillance cameras captured a woman being followed. Shortly after, that follower began to assault the woman. Then, Hugo came into the picture. And despite the stranger's knife, and despite the fact that walking by would be the norm, and despite the fact that he wouldn't get anything by stepping in, he stepped in to help that woman. And his actions were effective to some degree. The attacker fled after stabbing Hugo. In a matter of seconds, Hugo collapsed on the sidewalk from his injuries. As he lay bleeding and dying, some 20 people passed him by, but nobody offered help. One person even pulled out a cell phone and took some pictures, but didn't use that same phone to call 911. Even the woman whom Hugo risked his life to save didn't bother helping him in return. Our Good Samaritan was left to die. Finally, someone alerted the firefighters at around 7 a.m. They arrived at 7:23 a.m., but that was too late. Hugo had been bleeding out for well over an hour, and by the time they were there, he was already dead. The brave hobo's actions didn't even earn himself a timely ambulance. Now, quick recap here. The woman Hugo saved ignored him. Those who walked past him let him die. And if, God forbid, we employed mathematics, we would realize it took 23 minutes for the firefighters to reach a bleeding, dying man. You see, what we have here is a vicious cycle. Someone finally decides to stand up against injustice and violence, but almost immediately falls victim to this despicable indifference, thus discouraging others from taking actions which will only result in more tragedy like Hugo's. If we don't stop our indifference, then we will lose our humanity. Fortunately for us, there are still solutions to this problem. Single mother Lisa Long, whose child has conditions similar to the shooter at Sandy Hook Elementary School, offers us with a very solid solution. In her book, The Price of Silence, A Mom's Perspective on Mental Illness, she wrote, "We can talk about gun controls, but what is our obligation to people like Adam Lanza? What could we have done for his mother?" Her concept of what we could have done is an amazing way out of our current situation. If we consider what we could have done instead of what could have been done to us, then suddenly we are so much more motivated to take actions. It can be something as small as standing up to a school bully, or as big as noticing and reporting the ISIS member that happens to live next door. It only matters that you did something. Instead of waiting for a hero to come along and save our day, we can all take up that role and save ourselves. Well, I hope that my speech wouldn't leave any of you depressed, pessimistic, and antisocial. As I've already said, there are still ways to become better human beings. But more importantly, I wish that we've all learned a lesson about bystanding. I mean, we've talked about the cause and effects, and we've even came up with some solutions for this apathy that hurts so much. And this solution, I hope we can all apply to our everyday lives. Then, and only then, will we have the potential to be remembered as someone who took action to make our world a better place.